Macros on a carnivore diet. Do you have to count your macros? Do you have to track macros all the time? Can you just eat intuitively? Let's get into it. But first, got a great comment here from Gregory Michaels on one of our recent videos. Gregory says, for the first time in a few years, my blood glucose levels are back to normal. First, this way of eating saves your life. Then now working on the rest, including the fat loss and getting back in shape. Seems there's a couple auto spell errors there, but I hear you, I get your drift. He says, doing a ketovore diet, 5 days carnivore, and 2 days of keto on the weekends, working well. I might just go full carnivore. So yet another example of somebody stabilizing their blood glucose levels using a low carbohydrate approach. I'm stoked for you, man. Gregory, there are so many people out there who have done exactly what you are doing, right? So many people who have completely remitted and gotten rid of type 2 diabetes, who've lost body fat, who've decreased inflammation, and who've reformatted their whole body using low carbohydrate, ketogenic, and carnivorous diets. What's even crazier is that the mainstream medical establishment is basically ignoring it. Right? One of the most powerful interventions that we have for type 2 diabetes, for obesity, right, is reducing insulin levels using a ketogenic approach. But mainstream media completely ignores it. Mainstream science, not touching it. The medical establishment doesn't want to mess with it. And of course, the NHS right now is about to put 5,000 patients in the UK on a strict 800 calories a day diet for 3 months in a pilot to be rolled out in April. It's going to be followed by 9 months of support to help them maintain weight loss after their starvation diet. But you did this without having to starve yourself. You did this with eating steaks. You did this eating eggs. You did this eating nourishing foods that satiate you and that leave you feeling good, leave you feeling energized and not bloated and not starving. All right, so this is just crazy. 800 calorie a day diet they're about to give these people while ignoring all these people, the hundreds of thousands and possibly even millions of people who've used a ketogenic diet or even a carnivorous diet to put their diabetic or pre-diabetic blood glucose levels into remission, to reduce their inflammation, and to get on with their lives. So congrats on taking your life back, man. I think it's really interesting that you've been doing keto for a while and then you found yourself naturally moving towards more animal foods. I think that most people who do long-term keto find themselves in the same boat. People who find themselves eating more carnivore after doing a ketogenic diet for a long time are everywhere. I'm one of them, right? I've done keto since 2014 or 13. I think it was like 6 or 7 years now, right? So after all these years of keto, guess what I've learned as well? I don't need those plants. In fact, I feel much better when I'm not eating leafy greens. I get bloated, I get digestive issues when I'm shoving those leafy greens down the gullet, and I find I digest foods much better when I'm focusing on the essentials. What are the essentials? Animal foods. The only foods you can live off of exclusively are animal foods. Without supplementation, without anything else, you can live off of animal foods. You can't do that on plant foods without heavy supplementation, and even with heavy supplementation, you see massive degeneration in people's bodies, in people's minds, people's psychology on plant-based diets. So I'm stoked for you, man. You're leaning towards carnivore. Why not try it out? Right? There's no reason not to. You're not missing out on anything by skipping the broccoli at those meals, but I'm glad you're finding what works for you. Right? Obviously, not everybody needs to go carnivore. A very small portion of the population will ever even get interested in a carnivorous diet. It's about finding what works for you in your context. And hey, if those people in the NHS study enjoy their 800 calorie a day starvation diet, and it works for them, it allows them to live their life, to lose that weight, to put their diabetes in remission, I'm cool with it. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're not here to starve ourselves. We're here to eat in abundance the most nourishing and important foods for human beings, animal foods. And we're talking about macros on a carnivorous diet today. So the macros, protein, fat, and carbohydrates, are macronutrients, basically nutrients that are found in an abundance in foods. Protein and fat are essential. We have essential amino acids. We have essential fatty acids. Carbohydrates are non-essential. Right? So exogenous glucose is not required. Our body can actually make glucose as it needs to through a process called gluconeogenesis. Through breaking down glucogenic amino acids and even the backbone of fatty acids, which is glycerol, we can make glycogen and replenish that glycogen and also keep our blood glucose levels stable. And what people like Gregory in that comment earlier found, when you keep your blood glucose levels stable, a lot of really good things happen. We reduce our inflammation, we reduce our fasting insulin levels, but also we reduce our hunger levels. Stable blood glucose allows us to go long periods of time without food. You just don't notice it. I'm always telling people to skip the cakes, fill up on the steaks, and you're not going to care about anything else. You're not going to care about the cakes if you're filling up on the steaks. So, macros on a carnivore diet can be a little bit different than keto. On a ketogenic diet, we require, of course, protein and fat. Carbohydrate is non-essential. You're not eating much carbohydrate, maybe about 20, 30 grams of carbohydrate per day on a ketogenic diet. Of course, we require protein. If we go too much under our protein requirement, we'll be hungry. We'll be breaking down lean muscle tissue. We're going to feel like crap. If you go way too over on protein and don't have enough fat, you're also not going to feel very good. A lot of people talk about the concept of rabbit starvation, which is this, some people say it's a myth, but it's an idea that if you eat too much lean meats without enough fat, you're going to feel like crap. And I think this is pretty true. You might not die from eating just rabbits. And I have some friends who eat rabbits and they swear they're so fatty. We were talking about this the other day. You're probably not going to die if you eat just rabbits for a little while, but you need fat. Right? So on a ketogenic diet, what I usually recommend as far as protein and fat goes, of course, this depends on your context. If you're trying to lose weight, you're going to have different macros than someone trying to gain weight. If you've got 100 pounds to lose, your macros are going to look different than somebody like me who is going to be maintaining weight. If you're sedentary, your macros might look different than somebody who's highly active. All right, so when I'm working outside doing a lot of manual labor, I might have more carbohydrates. I might have more protein and fat as well, but we all require protein and fat. On keto, I usually recommend going at about 0.8 grams per pound of your lean body mass or 0.8 grams per pound of your desired weight if you have a lot of weight to lose in protein. Now fat, when you're first starting out, you don't really want to restrict fat. If you're trying to lose body fat, you still don't want to restrict your calories too much. We're not going for intense calorie restriction, we're going for satiety. And the calorie restriction happens later without you having to do it on purpose. That's what's so cool about keto. Also why a lot of people think that all that matters is you eat keto macros and you're going to lose weight, you're going to be satiated. Well, that's not entirely true for everybody. It's about what works in your context, and some people have different contexts. Some people end up overeating keto macros, still get fatter. All right, so on keto, get enough protein. 0.8 grams per pound of your lean body mass or your goal weight is enough. Fat, I usually recommend at least 1 gram of fat per gram of protein. If you got a lot of fat to lose, 1 gram of fat per gram of protein is going to put you in a nice zone where you're losing body fat. If you're trying to maintain or gain weight, you want at least 1.5, maybe even 2 grams of fat per gram of protein intake. Now, how does this apply to carnivore? Now, when we teach a carnivorous diet, of course, we teach it as a ketogenic carnivorous diet, where you're getting in enough fat to keep your hunger low, when you're getting in enough protein to keep your hunger low, and when you're burning fat for fuel. So on a carnivore diet, I usually recommend people have about 1 gram of protein per pound of your weight or your goal weight. So that tends to sometimes be a little bit more protein than on a straight keto diet, but not much different. Of course, you're not having roughage, you're not having salads, you're not having a lot of stuff that fills in space in the gut. So a little bit more protein and fat might be necessary to keep you satiated while you're transitioning, even if you're transitioning from keto. Remember, there is an adaptation period when you get into ketosis. And even if you're on a full keto diet, there is an adaptation to carnivore, right? Because you're having major changes in the gut as you remove the dietary fiber, as you remove the plant foods and focus on the animal foods. So on a carnivore diet, get enough protein, at least 1 gram per pound of your weight. Some people 1.5 grams, some people who are highly active are going even higher. What about fat? Right? Get enough protein and get enough fat on carnivore. A lot of people are focusing too much on lean meat. A lot of people who are doing carnivore are eating a bunch of very, very lean grass-fed beef, right? I love grass-fed beef. That's what I recommend people go for, especially supporting local farmers, right? Not importing your stuff from halfway around the world. Getting stuff from local farms is always going to give you a superior product at a superior price. But grass-fed beef can be pretty lean depending on the source, depending on the time of harvest, and depending on the animal. So, if you're eating a lot of lean grass-fed beef, you might not be getting enough fat. Sometimes adding some fat to that meal can be useful. Right now, when you're on a carnivore diet, it becomes a little bit more difficult to track your macros than if you're eating like a junk food keto diet, which I don't recommend to anybody. Right? But if you're buying foods that are not prepackaged, that are not processed, it's hard to tell how much protein and fat there is on it, right? So take like a bone-in ribeye or a bone-in T-bone steak. You might have 2 ribeyes from the same animal. 2 of the same cuts from the same animal can have completely different nutrient profiles as far as the macros go. So we're going to be estimating. But the good news is, with animal foods, they're so satiating, you're not getting any junk that you don't need. That the body usually ends up balancing out, and when you give it what you need, your satiety hits and you're not hungry for a bunch of other stuff. So get enough protein, get at least 1 gram per pound of your body weight, higher if you're an athlete. If you're super hungry, feel free to have more protein, and get enough fat. Get at least 1 gram of fat per gram of protein. For most people, when you first start out, I recommend going about 1.5 grams of fat per gram of protein. That's going to get you burning fat. That's going to tell your body, here's fat, that's your fuel source. Don't stress out, you're not starving. Burn that fat. All right, so on a carnivore diet, I usually recommend you track macros in the beginning, but as you establish your habits of getting in enough protein and fat, you're going to be able to eat intuitively without having to track macros. I haven't tracked macros in like 3 or 4 years. Not because I just eat whatever I want. Well, I kind of do eat whatever I want. That just happens to be animal foods. That just happens to be the foods that fuel me while keeping my inflammation low, while keeping my digestion on point, while keeping my mental clarity on point. And those just happen to be animal foods. All right, so you can eat intuitively, like me, once you've set the habits and put in the groundwork. And it takes about 21 days to rewire your central nervous system into a new habit. Every day is a repetition. As you put in those repetitions, it becomes less important to hyper-focus on the counting of the macros, the weighing and measuring of the food, because you're just consistent. The more consistent you can be, the better results you're going to get. So macros on a ketogenic diet and a carnivorous diet, yeah, they're important, but ultimately the goal is to eat intuitively. Now, just because you're doing keto and carnivore doesn't mean you'll never be able to eat carbohydrates. Doesn't mean carbohydrates are bad. In fact, you can even have some animal-based carbohydrates if you can handle them. Things like raw milk, raw honey. A lot of people do very well with these, especially if you time them correctly around intense workouts. Or if you're doing manual labor, you might want some more carbs as well. Depends on your context. It's not about what works for me. It's not about what works for anybody else on the freaking internet. It's about what works for you. What keeps you satiated? What keeps your body nourished, strong, and resilient? Find that and repeat it, right? Put that on repeat. Don't put your diet on shuffle. Put it on repeat. Very, very important to have consistency. With consistency, you don't have to track macros eventually. But in the beginning, put in the groundwork and track them. So we actually have a guide that shows you how to enter into a carnivore diet, how to start out a carnivore diet. You click the link down in the description below. You can check out the Quick Start Guide to Carnivory and 21-Day Carnivore Diet Meal Plan, where we teach you how to start this diet, how to do it right, and we give you a 21-day meal plan that gives you variety and that shows you all the amazing animal foods that you can include on a carnivorous diet. So, of course, you can find more at primaledgehealth.com. Check out the Quick Start Guide to Carnivory and 21-Day Carnivore Diet Meal Plan. Also, I've been forgetting about this one. My desk's a mess since we moved, but check out the Carnivore Cookbook. 0 carb recipes for people who really love animals. And there actually are even a few recipes in there that include some carnivore-based carbohydrates. The Carnivore Cookbook, Jessica spent obviously a lot of time and energy making this one. We've got a whole section on organs. showing you how to eat nose to tail. All right, so we show you how to make everything from bone broth to carpaccio, how to use things like beef heart. I got the beef heart meatballs there. How to use liver, kidney, even tongue. So we teach you how to eat nose to tail. And of course, there's a whole section on poultry, fish, eggs. So you can have a variety of animal foods on a carnivorous diet. And if you don't have a solid foundation of food prep habits, it's time to start working on that. Right? Finding some consistent meals that are simple and affordable and that you can prepare in a pinch, or that you can have pre-prep for yourself, and putting those on repeat. Very, very useful as you're reformatting your habits, you're reformulating your relationship with food. So check out the Carnivore Cookbook, available on our website now, in print or as an ebook. And the Quick Start Guide to Carnivory is there for you if you're looking to jump into it and get started. So remember, a carnivore diet, obviously not for everybody, but everybody can do it. Should everybody do it? Obviously not. Maybe a very, very small portion of the population who've gotten into it, but loads of people have gotten lots of benefits long term from focusing on animal foods. And of course, in the Quick Start Guide to Carnivory and 21-Day Carnivore Diet Meal Plan, we show you how to expand on your food choices and include more plant foods and test if you can handle them well. All right, so that's it, guys. Macros, you don't have to track them forever if you put in the work. If you put in the work and you put in the repetitions, you can put it on autopilot eventually. So you can find more at primaledgehealth.com. You're way more than what you eat, guys. All right, what you eat physically, very, very important. But remember, what you take in through your eyes, through your ears, through all this social media and all this mass media stuff, this affects us as well. That's why I like to sign out and tell you guys to get off the computers, get off the social media, get out there in the real world, create real relationships, get away from the freaking Netflix and the Facebook and all that fake stuff, create real relationships in your real communities. Get out there and live your real life.